Hello, Alexandra here. Today I'm going to talk about the superpowers of stage yellow in spiral dynamics and teal in integral. This channel is for folks at stage green wanting to learn about stage yellow and get to stage yellow. The first superpower or trait of this stage that is sort of new and it hasn't been developed in stage green yet, so when you step into stage yellow, you may start to find you think and live your life using meta-systems. A meta-system is a giant system comprised of smaller systems. This requires a breadth of study and a depth of study. Let me give you an example. Many people who do art forms seriously, not just as a hobby, but professionally, are using a meta-system in their art form. For example, if you're a jazz saxophone player, very experienced, well-studied, you may have practiced for years and years and listened for years and years and have been influenced by John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Joe Henderson, Sonny Rollins, Joe Lovano, Dave Liebman. These are some common influences. And what you've done after years and years of study is combine a little bit of each of the systems each of these players uses into your own system, which has morphed into your own unique style. You're very effective and you're incredibly authentic. This is the type of way that stage yellow thinks. So stage yellow isn't just going to do one or two things to get something done. For example, stage yellow might, when they look at the news, they might check online, they might take a peek at ABC, CBS, NBC, NPR, PBS, MSNBC. Stage yellow they might not watch Fox News, but they might take a peek just to see how the spin is going. They're looking for spin, they're looking for how the left is spinning, they're looking for how the right is spinning. They're listening to podcasts, both conservative and liberal. And what yellow is thinking about, so now they've created a giant meta-system of information, is not just getting the information and looking at the spin, but also starting to think about how we can resolve all these polarities in our country at this time. And I've talked about that in a previous video. Yellow is, because they have such complexities and such capacities, more than, according to the Spiral Dynamics book by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen, more complexities and capacities than any of the prior stages. So when you start using these meta-systems and you go to a breadth and a depth of study, you become very effective. And so as we transition in the next 10 years, when Ken Wilber says stage yellow or stage teal and integral is going to come online at 10% or more of the population, we are going to start to see some of these political polarities resolve that we're having in the United States right now. It's May of 2025, and yellow is the stage to do this with the heightened complexities and capacities. These meta-systems are very effective, and yellow actually can't help but think in meta-systems because they started in green searching and being very open and being very curious, and eventually all of the things they search, 10 years later, form into a giant meta-system. Here's another one. I mentioned this in a previous video. A friend has an unusual health challenge, so not only does she do Western medicine, she does acupuncture, she does homeopathy, she has a medical intuitive, she eats anti-inflammatory food, she takes supplements, she does tinctures, she does energy work on her own through the Donna Eden system, which is very, they have a lot of integrity. You can see the videos, the Donna Eden videos on YouTube. They teach you how to do acupressure, so that can be an assist during the week with her acupuncture. She does a special kind of exercise that moves lymph. Teresa Tapp's system, she can, moving lymph is important to her, so she knows how to manually move lymph on her body by, placing your hands on her face and putting them in different positions and just manually moving the limbs. So she has gone in, she's taken 10 years to learn all this stuff and create a system that is working for her. The health challenge she has supposedly has no cure. Well, guess what? This is working and she's much improved. So this is what starts to happen in stage yellow. You're effective in green, you're open in green, but you start to solve challenges in stage yellow that you didn't think were solvable. Now, you also might have, when you get to stage yellow, by this time, because you started really working on yourself, doing your inner work in green, a meta system that looks something like this. Like you've gone to counseling, you've identified the patterns, you have an awareness of the different attachment styles. Maybe one of your parents is a dismissive avoidant, and you understand what that means and why they're not sort of involved in your life. You understand why your family is dysfunctional. Maybe you have narcissistic parents, you're setting boundaries, you're processing your grief, and then maybe you've attended a 12-step program for many years, and it's very different than counseling. It's really, really great with helping you with detachment. So you're just have years of experience, and you're really have heightened coping skills. Maybe you have done some Jungian work. There's a place you can take really fun Jungian classes on archetypes at the Center for Jungian Studies online. And yellow is a stage that is all about archetypes. Maybe you've read the Jean Bolin books on gods and goddesses, the Greek gods and goddesses, which are archetypes. Fantastic. Very yellow. Or one incredible author to read is Robert A. Johnson. He's a Jungian. These authors I mentioned are very easily readable, and working with archetypes can profoundly help you have much better insight and much better integration. Maybe you're using your journal to talk, to your archetypes, active imagination. Maybe you have some trauma and you've done some EDMR or some brain spotting or some internal family systems and parts work. Plus, you're familiar with the stages at yellow, likely, especially if you're yellow, you're listening to all the videos, and you maybe had coaching on that. That is a meta system. That is what I'm talking about at stage yellow. Green is still, especially early green, still in the searching phase. So this is one of the meta systems, are one of the superpowers of yellow. They've started all the searching and the inner work in green, and they've done it for years. So it just coalesces into a very personalized and a very authentic meta system, regardless of what area of their life it is, because yellows tend to just think in meta systems. And this is a little bit different than stage green, so that is why stage yellow is so effective, and it's a superpower of yellow. And of course, out of this comes insight. Yellow is a profoundly and in a startling way, an insightful stage. Much more insightful than the previous stages, therefore much more effective on working with their shadow. And they don't have too many blind spots, but if they do, they're working on it. So yellow is a very active stage with a very organized mind, and by the time you get to stage yellow or teal and integral, you're going to have a very organized psyche. It's, had I known this when I was at stage green about what I was headed for, maybe 10 years, 15 years later, I would have been utterly startled. And so, yes, keep working on yourselves, because there are great rewards. If you're at green and you're doing the inner work, keep going, because your life can be transformed as you deepen your work. So this is surprising. Another sort of superpower of stage yellow is embodiment. And embodiment is where, at stage orange, we're just pushing our bodies, we're pushing ourselves, we're achievement-oriented, we're goal-oriented. Sometimes oranges tend to be workaholic-ish, and it's all about pushing the body, pushing the body, pushing the body. At green, we stop for a minute and we start listening to our body. We start to realize, yeah, maybe my job pays well, but I don't like my job. It doesn't feel right in my body. You know, these people, my coworkers, I'm not enjoying myself. This feels wrong. This relationship feels wrong. And you start to really tune in to the body wisdom. And so by the time you get to stage yellow, you're quite embodied. And what that does is it really grounds you out, and you're able to, you know, green can be a little bit out of their bodies. It does depend a little bit on your Myers-Briggs type and how much trauma you have. So like if you're an INFP and INFJ, you might not be in your body just because of your type, but you could be any Myers-Briggs type and have a little trauma and be a little less in your body. And then when you get to stage green, you might start experimenting with, you know, some of the new age stuff, that a branch of green, not all of green, experiments with that, but you can even, new age can kind of pull you out of your body. You're out in the ethers, you're exploring stuff. And what that does when you're not in your body is, I've talked about this in another video, is that when you're not in your body, you can ignore your instincts, your bodily instincts, where you get those red flags from people. So you might get into relationships or overstay in relationships because you're not listening to your gut. You're not fully in your body. And yellow is much more in their body. So they're very, very quickly attuned to seeing red flags. They're very quickly attuned to what works for them, what's authentic for them. And so that is just kind of a little bit of a surprising, more of a superpower in yellow than it is in green, and worth mentioning. And the third superpower I want to mention for stage yellow is radical self-responsibility. So green does take self-responsibility. They do start to do the inner work and, you know, work on their triggers, and that's taking self-responsibility. But yellow goes to the point of being radical. So if yellow is triggered by you, maybe you said something, maybe, you know, they might not even tell you. They're going to take it back to their parts work. They're going to take it back to their journaling. Yellow transcends and includes green, so the last thing stage yellow wants to do is marginalize someone or trigger someone from a marginalized group, or say something insensitive. Yellow doesn't want to trigger you, but if you trigger yellow, you might not hear about it, because yellow is profoundly, profoundly self-responsible. And green is more communal, and green, you know, will tell you, hey, this is how I feel, and I feel this way when you do that, and I'd like you to change. And yellow, when you start getting to late stage yellow, less and less and less, they are getting to the point where they don't need other people to change. Yes, absolutely. They do want to be sensitive and politically correct, but when things don't go their way, or when they're in a life situation they can't control, or maybe when they're around people who, maybe in their family, who are challenging, they have so many inner resources that they're just going to go immediately to self-responsibility. They're going to first say, you know, what's my part in it? That is one of the favorite things to say at stage yellow or teal and integral. What is my part in it? And immediately start working on that. And then later they might need to set a boundary, or they might choose not to, because maybe that other person they know is not capable of changing. So these are some ways that yellow is a little bit different than green, with the meta systems and a little more embodiment and even more self-responsibility than green. Green superpowers are, of course, heightened empathy, diversity, equity, inclusion, activism. Everyone has a voice. So as you go to stage yellow, start to notice in your life these additional superpowers, so that you can know when you're transitioning to stage yellow. And if you're in green, you're in early green, you can still practice these just by hearing some of the bullet points of stage yellow. So I hope you found this information useful, and I'm sending you blessings and love, and I'll see you in the next video.